The all I can relate to right now is like whether it's relating to intelligence gathering like FBI and Men in Black and things like that.
Willing to take on a little bit of risk and trying to move quickly. That's not always easy in intergovernmental government bureaucratic organization.
Whatever we have been discussing, in our personal phone calls regarding what could we do for it, it's exactly what the community should be aware of. Like,
I don't know why I'm bringing Avengers into this, but I kind of feel like we are trying to protect the Earth from all these issues. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the season 2, episode 5 of Space Smurfs, a podcast where we mostly discuss about space stuffs, but we also end up rambling about K-pop to K-drama and NFTs and things like that. And this is your potentially spaced out space person, Alina. And today you might have seen there is a difference with the co-host situation here. So yeah, I'm coming towards you with great news with this episode. So as we all know, Asia Pacific Oceanian Space Association had a design thinking workshop last year with APRSAF 27th session. And this year, APOSA Cosmic Sandbox Design Thinking Workshop is back with its second episode of the season. Isn't that really great? And we have a very interesting topic to look out on this workshop as well. And to discuss and tell you guys about what exactly this is going to be and things like that, we have the head of research and Cosmic Sandbox lead with me today as a co-host. Yes, Dr. Sindhu is one of my co-hosts, and I think there is no other person to explain what is Cosmic Sandbox and what is going to be the next Cosmic Sandbox about to tell you guys about it. So, Sindhu, what is the next Cosmic Sandbox going to be like?
hey, Alina, and hi, Aditya, and hello to all the listeners and viewers out there. Thank you, first of all, Smurfs, for accommodating me as one of your co-hosts for this episode. And yes, exactly, like our next episode of Sandbox is right around the corner. You keep a lookout for all the posters that's going to come up during the next couple of weeks to know the dates, details, experts, and things like that. And regarding the Cosmic Sandbox itself, it's a one-day event, and it's a flagship event of APOSA. What it tries to bring is multidisciplinary awareness among the space community, and also to forge a community of problem solvers. It is aligned based on the design thinking principle, but also integrate multiple disciplines around the challenge topic that we will be providing later on. And to conclude, the next Cosmic Sandbox and also the previous one was around space for environment and climate, which is a very challenging theme in the Asia Pacific region for multiple reasons.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that sounds so cool. And though I was a part of the last year's Cosmic Sandbox workshop as well, I mean, I think we looked into disaster management and risk reduction, and we had a very amazing panel of experts last year. So please do check out our last year webinars as well, which we will link down in the description box. But by the way, I think space for environment and climate is really inspiring and exciting. I mean, it's so fresh and bro, it's too informative as well. And what is the topic for this year? I'm so excited to learn more about it. Like, what is it about?
Of course, right. It's this time it's for Earth observation application for Earth intelligence, which is a very fancy word, I would say, Earth intelligence. And it is really interesting to look into the nuances of how space and space-based assets can actually contribute or add to this Earth intelligence that we, from around the world, multiple companies and governments are looking into.
Wow, I mean, Earth intelligence, the all I can relate to right now is like whether it's relating to, intelligence gathering like FBI and Men in Black and things like that. I know I'm going overboard with that stuff, but anyway, and also the participants who are interested to join this workshop, please do know that you can directly interact with these experts that APOSA Cosmic Sandbox executive members are trying to bring in. And it's really awesome, right? Like you can directly interact with the experts on the workshop day, and also you can be a problem solver within the Asia Pacific region. So why are you waiting for? Register right now for the Cosmic Sandbox workshop, and all the details are linked in the description box. And if you want to know more about it, reach out to the social media handles that is also linked down. Yep.
Oh, and regarding your comment on FBI intelligence, Men in Black, that sounds cool. And I think some of the companies would agree as well, just like how we have here our expert today, who is gathering multiple data and, insights about the multiple aspects of Earth intelligence, who we will introduce soon, guys. Wait for a bit more time. And to just give you an idea, this is actually a sandbox collaborating with Space SmurfsxCosmic to bring all of these experts to you guys to share the knowledge, right? It's not just about the workshop, but also we wanted to gather and document this knowledge that these experts are having and possessing during the past many years of experience. And as for the expert for today's episode, I'm more than happy to welcome Aditya Agrawal, founder of D4D Insights, a mission-driven consulting firm focused on catalyzing data and technology solutions for the environment, international development, and sustainability. And our expert will be talking to you about the digital Earth projects that the company has undertaken in the past many years. And he will be talking to us from the environment and commercial perspective and introducing everyone to this concept itself through this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sindhu, for that introduction. And welcome to Space SmurfsxCosmic, Aditya. And I feel so glad that you are joining us as an expert for this Space SmurfsxCosmic podcast, as well as for the Cosmic Sandbox Design Thinking Workshop. Over to you, Aditya.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great, really, really great. So without further ado, I think we can begin the smurfing. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Jumping straight into the question, Aditya, please tell us about D4D Insights, what it does, and a little bit of introduction about yourself as well.
Sure. Well, again, thanks for having me, and really looking forward to engaging in this discussion with everyone that's listening. I'm the founder of D4D Insights, Data for Development, and like you said previously, the focus of our company is really around how do we use data and technology to support sustainable development, mostly within an international development context. Our main approach is that often what happens when you're trying to build data and technology solutions is that in many cases it becomes a build it and they will come type of an approach, especially within an international development context. Building trust and relationships with the stakeholders and the countries and the regions that each one of these solutions is meant to serve is one of the most critical pieces that leads to how those solutions are then going to be sustainable in the long term. So we do all of our work really focused on a demand-driven, user-centric, co-design type of an approach, where it's inclusive by design, meaning that there's also going to be inclusive governance, countries and stakeholders that the solution is meant to serve are going to be part of the decision-making process. There's going to be representative governance, you're building trust and relationships, you're creating an open data ecosystem. Those are the principles that D4D Insights works by. We were established in 2016. We supported the launch of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, where actually a lot of this digital Earth work that we supported started from, because we were engaging with a number of countries across Africa that led, I can go into more detail on this later, but it was really based on a level of engagement that we were having with countries to understand how they could create data ecosystems, roadmaps to create these data ecosystems so that data and technology could better support not just the sustainable development goals overall, but actually how the SDGs align to their national development priorities. So maybe let me stop there. I think I've probably said too much about the company already.
I think that was really a concise idea about what exactly is D4D Insights and how you guys work and things like that. But yeah, going to the second question. So, what exactly is this Digital Earth project that you have taken up, and why are they considered to be the need of the hour, let's say?
Well, I think, so I'll start from,
Mhm.
I guess, the problem that it's trying to solve for. So typically, before much of the currently freely available data became free and open, you'd have to pay $1,000 a scene or so for Landsat data, for example. And then you'd work under a model where you'd have to take each scene and download it. And then you'd have to do all the georectification and pre-processing of that imagery, which would really be about 80% of the time that you're spending on that piece of data before you get to any of the analysis for the outcomes that you're looking for. So it was very, very time consuming. At an earlier point in time, it was also very expensive. Now all of that data has been made freely open by the US and Europe through the Landsat and Sentinel programs. At the same time, we're in the fourth industrial revolution when it comes to cloud computing, access, the efficiency of compute, the cost of cloud computing, and so forth. It's easier now to make data more accessible through scalable infrastructure. And so that opens up a whole different way of how you're able to access and use these data. And so where the Digital Earth Australia is really where Digital Earth program started. They created the Open Data Cube and then basically open sourced that. And they were able to really scale the Digital Earth program at the continental level by creating a Digital Earth Australia for the entire country. I learned about the Open Data Cube when I was a director of the data ecosystems team at the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. I was working with Columbia at the time. There was work that we were doing with the National Statistics Office and their Ministry of Environment. And the whole intent was, how do we build bridges across ministries internally to a country such that the data that the Open Data Cube could provide could also then solve for some of the environmental indicators that the National Statistics Office was looking after. But that started triggering an idea, and based on 5 countries that we were working with at the time in Africa, they had very similar issues across all 5 countries when it came to environment, climate change, deforestation, food security, and so forth, all of which are things that Earth observation data could help support. And so thanks to now a good friend of mine, Brian Killow from NASA, and good friends at Amazon Web Services, we were able to create like a very quick partnership to get the Africa Regional Data Cube launched in 2018 for those 5 countries, which were Senegal, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Kenya, and Tanzania. But that was just the start of it, because we also knew that if you do it for 5 countries, it's easy to scale up to the entire continent. Plus, there was more demand coming in from the entire continent. So thereafter, Geoscience Australia and the Group on Earth Observations brought us on board to do the business case for Digital Earth Africa, which would be really looking at the political, institutional, technical, financial, and capacity development considerations to launch a full-blown Digital Earth Africa program that would be a sustainable program once you start thinking about all of those different factors. That then led to a $20 million investment from the government of Australia and the Helmsley Family Trust. That program was then launched in 2019. And then I supported the leadership and the establishment of that program until early last year. The idea behind Digital Earth Africa, per those principles that I was speaking to earlier, is that we don't want this to be top down. We want to be able to leverage the capacity and the skill sets that already exist across Africa, and most importantly, have the program be launched such that it is owned and operated locally and institutionalized within Africa. What that really means is that for anything that the program should be doing, again, it's going to be inclusive. You're building the right trust and relationships. You're aligning to existing programs and projects that are already happening across Africa. And you're responding to the needs and priorities of those countries while building capacity across those countries. And so that's, to me, like that's what Digital Earth is really all about. How do we create the right level of capacity? How do we make data, Earth observation data, more accessible and usable? How do we create the right kinds of products and services according to use cases that countries need? And how do we scale that across different regions? So now we're also doing the same for the Pacific community. Now we're launching Digital Earth Pacific, going through a similar approach by really engaging with stakeholders to understand needs and priorities, and then institutionalizing the program locally with member country inputs as part of the overall governance of the program.
I mean, that is like a very detailed idea about what exactly is Digital Earth and everything. And I think from what you have mentioned, this environment and climate change issues are not a joke anymore. Like I have heard a lot of political people saying that it's a joke. It's not true, but yeah, it's happening all around the world. And since digital like D4D Insights has been looking into like different countries and different parts of the world, one question that comes to my mind is like, how exactly it is different, like when going from different countries, like you have been in Pacific community, you have been to Australia, you have been working with Africa. So all these countries in different, all these areas, they have different climate change issues, right? Like some might be having like flooding, some might be having deforestation or other things and things like that. So how is it differing with these countries? Like how are the activities of D4D Insights differing when it comes to each countries, let's say?
Well, I would say that our activity isn't necessarily different, because fundamentally what you're trying to do is use the same approach to identify what are those needs and priorities that might differ across those regions. And I think the thing that's usually different is how you engage and what some of the politics may be that allow for that engagement. And so when it comes to the issues, there are differences in terms of technically how you might apply a solution. But when it comes to the actual problems, everything from land use and land cover change, deforestation, agriculture and food insecurity, climate change oriented issues around sea level rise, coastal change, and all, other similar issues, those are pretty consistent, whether you're looking at Africa or the Pacific Islands. Now, of course, in the Pacific Islands, the big issue there, and this is the thing that I think a lot of the world just doesn't really realize, is that, you often think that, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to, Fiji or Vanuatu or Tonga, these beautiful Pacific Islands, and they are beautiful, but you think it's a paradise that everyone lives in, and that's not the case. They're, one of the poor, some of the most poor countries in the world, and the most vulnerable in the world because of climate change and sea level rise that's taking place, where countries in the Pacific have to now create national strategies around displacement because of sea level rise, right? And so, that's one clear difference in terms of the regions by which these programs are being implemented. And I think in the case of the Pacific, it's also really adds to the urgency of how quickly we need to get this done. But technically, it's what's nice about the Digital Earth programs is that fundamentally what you're trying to do is create an infrastructure that's open, that's interoperable, and that the algorithms through Jupyter notebooks, et cetera, are made openly accessible. And so therefore it's easy to transfer methods and algorithms across regions and then basically tweak them to be adaptable to the new place that you're trying to deploy it.
I mean, that's so interesting to hear about how, it is not exactly so different with these countries, like how about the different activities that D4D Insights is doing in here, and especially the digital earth and things like that. And again, going back to the point that you mentioned, like I think a lot of countries within the Asia Pacific region, a lot of countries who have a lot of natural beauty and things like that, they all are at the verge of climate change issues these days. Like there are a lot of countries who can't even financially reach out and do the things that is necessary for climate change issues and to deal with them, to be exact. So yeah, I think this is whatever D4D has been doing. I think this is really great and inspiring to a lot of people. And to add, I think last year Cosmic Sandbox, we had the Fiji community as one of Aditya from the Fiji community as one of our experts. So we do resonate with what is exactly happening with the Pacific countries and how they are actually facing a lot of issues to, let's say, when it comes to environment and climate change matters. Yeah.
I totally agree. Like once I started actually following the news updates of Pacific Islands, and also talk to people who have worked with the projects related to Pacific Islands, then I realized like all the more efforts is needed to bring this community to be represented. That's what I would say. And to add to it, I think congratulations are in order for you and for D4D Insights, because I read the news that Blue Climate Summit, you have won one of the projects that was gotten. Can you please explain a bit about what it is, and just quickly something.
Sure. No, thanks for that. And I guess one thing I do want to say before I answer that question is that this was not done by D4D Insights alone. There's been many partnerships and organizations and governments, most importantly, that have really led to the success of this program. We're just happy to be part of the bigger process. And so, with the Digital Earth Pacific program, we've gotten now to kind of a process where we've done a lot of engagement. We understand what the needs and priorities are. There's a business case that's been created. So we're really now looking at accelerating the project itself, mainly by getting the right level of funding to now fully establish and launch the program. And so the Digital Earth Pacific program was, we applied to this thing called the Blue Climate Summit, which is being put on by Prince Albert of Monaco, his foundation, and Mark Benioff, who's the CEO of Salesforce. And the project got accepted, which we're all really excited about. And I think the idea behind the summit is I think there was 20 projects that were accepted, and the idea behind the summit is to really accelerate those projects, but do that in a way where you're bringing together a network of scientists, practitioners, donors, private sector actors, and so forth, as a way to cross-collaborate across all of those different organizations and the projects, and hopefully, get the right kind of discussion going to really move Digital Earth Pacific to the next level.
Awesome. Like all the best for it, and our hearty wishes as well. One thing I keep noticing from all of this information that we have passed is how multidisciplinary this entire concept is, right? When it comes to applying the EO data or doing the Earth intelligence, let's say, even without space industry per se on focus, it's very important that we should know multiple aspects of the topic to actually do something about it. And I think whatever examples that you have given so far are the best way to explain why we should look into the multidisciplinary aspect, and also why whoever wants to do something about it has to understand how it all comes together, right? From digital earth projects to anything that you just mentioned, even the Blue Climate Summit, they are looking into multiple disciplines to come together, right? And I think that's very reassuring for us as well. We have had this thought of multidisciplinary being a key for the community to do something about something. And I think it's very interesting to know that from your experience as well, there is a lot of evidence add to it. And And also I noticed this co-design and then, designing the projects along with whoever is doing it. I think I can understand how effective and efficient it could be, because most of the times people just, sometimes we just, there will be a business, but they wouldn't have really talked to the users, and at the end of the day there will be like a huge gap between those two. And I think what you're doing, the approach that you have taken is really amazing. And that is also something what we realized while we were reading about the design thinking approach, right? So that is where you actually get into the user, empathize with them, create this need, what is the need, and detail that. So I totally understand that, a process. But what I'm amazed is that you are actually implementing it on a scaled level, on a business case, right? That's really amazing and inspiring to us to know that. And I remember you mentioned about this needs, is that, key needs across different countries. Could you explain what you have observed as through these need assessments that among the countries?
Yeah. I mean, the way that we usually approach that is that we will do like a national workshop or a national consultation, and we try to do that through a multi-stakeholder type of an approach. And we do it as a national workshop because what you're trying to then also achieve through that is to build political will and buy-in for the initiatives as well. So we just did the Fiji national consultation, I think about a month ago now. And so we had the Minister for Lands and Mineral Resources open up that workshop. He was impressed, I think, with everything that he heard and saw, to the extent where he stayed the entire morning for listening to all the presentations, which is not very often that a minister will do that. But really, there's I guess there's several objectives to it. One is that what I just spoke to. Two is to bring all the different ministries together, because often what happens within government is that ministries don't often know what each other are doing. And so that's another kind of added benefit. And then third is, yes, to better understand how they're currently using geospatial and Earth observation data, what are the key kind of issues and opportunities that they've observed through their work, how do they want to address capacity development, what are the real kind of needs and priorities for their particular organization. And we also try to align that to what are the key kind of policy drivers across the government when it comes to either national development priorities, sustainable development, data sharing, use of geospatial information, and so forth. And out of that, you get an understanding of, sort of the key needs and priorities. And in the context of the Pacific, it really comes to all of the key needs come across three main buckets, which are food security, climate change, and disaster management. There's the unique thing I think that we'll have to think about in the Digital Earth Pacific context, as opposed to work that's been done in Australia or Africa, is that in the blue Pacific continent, obviously 98% of the area is all ocean. And so now how do we bring in more oceans and climate data? How do we think about fisheries management and stock assessments, illegal fishing, vessel tracking, looking at, from a disaster management perspective, how to better mitigate against cyclones and different types of weather events. Obviously, there was an unprecedented event that took place in Tonga not too long ago with the immense eruption that took place. And when these types of things happen, how do we quickly deploy the insights that Earth observations can provide to support the mitigation and response that needs to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to the space-related matters, I think Earth observation satellites or that technology is something that it's been widely used for climate change actions, let's say, like from the space perspective. And I heard that you have to engage with the government officials and the ministries to get things properly implemented and things like that, which goes to my next question, actually, which has been there since the beginning of this podcast itself. Like, there will be a lot of stakeholders in such a project, like not just public actors like the government or something like that. Like, there will be private actors who will be investing it, or individuals or institutions, let's say. I know there will be a pretty of stakeholders for D4D insights. And again, how do you manage to gather them together? Like, I mean, how does the implementation goes? Because our Cosmic Sandbox participants will be more than eager to know more about how the business works behind all of this. Like, when it comes to like managing with the stakeholders and things like that, how does it work?
I mean, so at the government level, we will, well, I guess part of it also comes back to the governance. So like in the case of Digital Earth Pacific, one of the early things that we did was to create an interim steering group until it's interim until we get the full program launched itself. And in that steering group are all the 4 pilot countries that we're working with in the Pacific. So that's the Marshall Islands, Tonga, Fiji, and Vanuatu. And we really rely on the focal points within each of the countries to really bring together the key stakeholders. We don't want to be prescriptive and sort of say, this is who we want in the workshop. We want countries to be able to help define that. And then we're providing inputs into some of the cross connections that could happen. So we provide suggestions on who should be coming into the engagement process, because you definitely want organizations like ministries of agriculture and water and environment and climate change and so forth included. At the same time, are there civil society organizations that you're already working with that should be included? What's the private sector level engagement look like as well? Who are the development partners that you're also engaging with? And so it's really a consultative process with the governments themselves. We want them to really be the owners of this process, because fundamentally they are the key stakeholder. But what we're trying to do, especially as the program matures, is now how do we get government to better also engage with civil society and private sector organizations as well?
It's interesting to hear about. Like, I feel like governments do play a major role when it comes to whatever that happens on Earth. So, yeah. Sindhu, over to you for the next question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was observing as well. There are multiple aspects to this project.
Exactly.
There is need assessment, there is business case development, there is consultation with different stakeholders, there is technology, of course, involved that you need to prepare the data and then deliver it. Some sort of an AI will come in place. Of course, now AI is everywhere, right? And so, what are, if you can name a few challenges in all of these different segments, it would be really great to understand the problem in depth.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like any of these programs, one of the challenges is always resources. And not just for the program itself, it's resources that you want to be able to make available to countries themselves. And so doing fundraising and getting the right level of funding and resources into the program is always a bit of a challenge. I think everyone already knows that, and everyone kind of experiences that. The other, I guess, challenges that we've come across are one is that it's often, depending on how the program is being implemented. In the Pacific, this is less of a problem. In Africa, it was a bigger challenge. Is how should that program be appropriately institutionalized, and where should it be institutionalized? There, depending on how the program gets established, and the region that it's getting established in, there can be lots of bureaucracy and lots of politics. There could be less of that. Finding the right institution that has the right mandate and the skill sets and capacity. How do you build up those skill sets and capacity so that you can own the program in the long term? And so I think early on, probably even before you get to the point of the program being launched, really sort of figuring out how and where that program is going to be institutionalized is going to be key. In the Pacific, that's not a problem. I mean, that's one of the reasons that the Digital Earth Pacific program is, I wouldn't say easier, but like at least we've got the institutional piece figured out, is because SPC, the Pacific Community, which is already the technical intergovernmental mechanism for the Pacific, is where Digital Earth Pacific will be housed. So that's another bit of a challenge. The third, I would say, is all of these programs are meant to be agile and nimble, and with that, willing to take on a little bit of risk and trying to move quickly. That's not always easy in intergovernmental government bureaucratic organizations. Sure. And because of that, the pace at which you can make programs move is a little bit slower than you'd like. But I think that is something that can be overcome. It really requires this kind of leadership and a cultural kind of shift in order for programs to move more in that direction. And then maybe, I guess the one other thing that I would conclude with is just really kind of helping to understand that there is kind of a balance that's required between thinking about the technical and thinking about sort of the programmatic. And what I mean by that is the technical part, while it's not easy at all, and I'm not meaning to imply that it's easy, it's something that can be figured out, right? If you have the right people figuring out, it's going to get figured out. The harder thing is now, how do you get people and institutions working together collaboratively such that whatever technical solution is being developed can then be deployed as it needs to be and taken up and used and so forth, right? So this kind of connection between how you create the technical solutions and what that means programmatically and institutionally is a challenge sometimes to always help people understand, because sometimes stakeholders will say, just give us the solution. Well, you can't just give the solution without sort of the right mechanisms being in place in order for those solutions to then be taken up and used.
Yeah, I mean, totally resonating to what you just mentioned about, how to implement it properly. To bring in all these different actors into this section and, implement whatever the solution that comes out of all these discussions on and all these projects that you guys are doing. And the proper implementation is always something that's, everyone have like huge ideas, they have everything happening. And when it comes to implementation, that's where most of from my experience, that's where everyone lacks, like how to implement it properly. And I'm really impressed, like how D4D has been doing so far and the Digital Earth project itself. It's really amazing to hear about it. Yeah.
I actually have a little bit of a follow-up from one of the things you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. So I remember you mentioned this localization of projects, and then you also involve the manpower that is inside a country. I think it's very niche and very important in regions like Asia Pacific, where the countries have limited capacity. So that goes along with technology transfer and things like that. So how exactly is this, let's say, capacity building works, and how do you utilize this manpower in the country, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah, I'll say in the context of the Pacific work, we haven't fully figured that out yet because we haven't fully launched the program. But in the business case, there are some ideas that we have around it and some experience from other places. I mean, the first part is that we want to think about capacity development holistically. So it's not just about technical training. It's also about communications and outreach. How do you provide the right level of, I guess, tools for the lay audience so that they understand how Earth observations could apply to their daily lives. And then it's also about how do you present this information to decision makers so that they know how to most use that information effectively and what does it mean for journalists and so forth, right? So we want to think about this holistically, not just, you know, training people to be remote sensing scientists and now they know how to use the data. Then I think, you know, in terms of like what that means as an approach, we, you know, there's train the trainers types of programs that we can start thinking about within SPC itself. And I should also mention this, if I haven't mentioned this previously, is that Stuart Minchin, who's the Director General of SPC, this is really under his vision. He wanted to bring Digital Earth Pacific into the Pacific community as one of his mandates as the new Director General for the Pacific. And he and I actually worked together in getting the business case established for the Africa program as well. And so, you know, you have within SPC top level leadership that's really behind the program. I mean, going back to my earlier institutional comments, that also makes this a little bit easier. But coming back now to the capacity development part, we really want to use the networks that exist within the Pacific Island countries. So if we can tap into the universities and use those as a mechanism to also sort of create more on the training side, what that means for how to use open data cubes or how to use the planetary computer from Microsoft and so forth, we can do that. We can also create a secondment program where you have, let's say, 2, 3, 5 people that come into SPC for a year. Now you're really doing sort of on-the-job kind of training embedded within the Pacific Community Organization itself. And then you go back to your countries sort of through like a train the trainers type of a program and start building capacity in that way. But it's a key part of the program. And then there's also, I guess, different approaches to it. One is, do you want to go in and actually, you know, create, learn Python, learn remote sensing, and how to do programming through Jupyter notebooks to create new algorithms and so forth, right? Like that's one thing. The other part is, and because SPC is already sort of the technical mechanism for many of the countries, as products and services get created, it's more about how do you now take this, let's say, NDVI analysis on agriculture, take it back to a country and say, this is what it means for you. Really, this is how you interpret it. And now if you're thinking about policy and decision-making and action based on that particular service that's being provided, will help you understand how that data can best apply to your policy frameworks and other things that you're doing within the country.
That makes total sense. Actually, it didn't occur to me until you explained that capacity building is not just about technology, right? Like from a technology perspective, if I am from an engineering background, so whenever I hear, okay, capacity building, I just assume, okay, I'm gonna go to a institution, teach them Python, AI, how to use, download the data, geolocation, blah blah blah. But actually, when you explain, it makes a lot more sense that it's also part of educating the decision makers or creating this awareness about different multiple stakeholders who are involved. That is also part of the capacity building. So that's from a different perspective, I would say.
And I think like it's capacity building also includes bringing in awareness to the people. And I have this very strong opinion when it comes to the space environment itself within the Asia Pacific. Like there is a lot of like lack of awareness among the countries on what exactly space, what is the current role or the power that space actually hold in our day-to-day life. And there are a lot of people who talks about space, no offense, but about coming from the Western side, there are a lot of articles, there are a lot of people who actually speak for it and stands for it. when it comes to Asia Pacific, you see like 3-4 countries who have like strong space power or space activities, and then I mean, we don't know what else is happening. Like if I ask a normal person out there, like, do you know that Vietnam have a space program or Indonesia have a space program? They'll be like, no. I'm pretty sure about it. So I think Asia Pacific, I mean, including Oceania also into this, all these activities which include space needs to get more accelerated. And like you mentioned clearly about the capacity building, awareness is the most important step. And I think even APOSA, one way or another, does that through our activities, like bringing that awareness and reaching out to people within the region itself to do more and to achieve more through space. And I mean, this is really amazing. Now my spirits are all up. I'm like, yes, we are going to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like I'm all excited because I mean it's all real, right? Like whatever we have been discussing, in our personal phone calls regarding what could we do for it, it's exactly what the community should be aware of. Like the more the community is aware of things that space can do, the more easier for companies like P40 to actually implement something, I believe. And also there is more chances for more people to get involved and do something about some of these challenges, right? And it's really amazing and inspiring. So I heard that there is a phase called business case development in your process, and how does this work? Like how do you exactly bring up a business case? It's very difficult when it comes to something that's environment related, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sort of the way that we kind of do it is it's really kind of a funnel, and at the end of the funnel is this business case, and really it's all of the engagement that we're doing through the needs assessments, through stakeholder engagement, through consultation with the institutions that might host the program, to international experience that really goes into the business case itself. And what that's really meant to do is, again, like kind of think about the institutional, political, capacity development, financial, and there's one thing that I'm forgetting there, but there's 5 key components to it that really speak to how this program is going to become sustainable. And it's meant to really articulate that there is buy-in from the region, that this is something that is needed. These are the types of issues that it can address. Here, that's kind of translated into these particular use cases. We'll usually create a prototype in parallel. So there is a prototype now in place for Digital Earth Pacific in partnership with Microsoft and the Planetary Computer. It will obviously have other pieces to it, like, what the budget is, and, like if we want to think about it out to 2030, this is the kind of resources that are required and the staffing that's required, and it'll talk about the roadmap. And that roadmap usually is one where you really want to spend the first 2 or 3 years fully establishing the program. And that's everything from strategy to operations to governance to technical infrastructure. Once you have all of that in place, and none of this is linear, there's things that are happening in parallel. So once all of that is happening, what you're also then doing is the products and services that are getting created. Now you're really kind of focusing on capacity development and uptake around those products and services. And then finally, what you're trying to get to now is a data ecosystem approach, such that you're really creating innovation and entrepreneurship opportunities around the infrastructure. And what that really means is that because everything is API enabled, it's an open and free infrastructure such that it's a public good. Now you really want to start creating the kinds of opportunities that allow entrepreneurs and young businesses to start accessing that data and creating the downstream applications that then really mean you're getting more sort of economic return and such that's being created from this investment.
And I think reaching to the last few minutes of this podcast, I feel like though this wasn't like the usual Space Smurfs podcast like we had in the last few episodes, like even though we had like less funny moments, I will say, but I think this was more informative. And I don't know why I'm bringing Avengers into this, but I kind of feel like, we are trying to, protect the earth from all these issues, and we are trying to launch our own system. And, who knows, maybe even one day we'll have our own Tony Stark. Yeah, Iron Man. I'm always rooting for Iron Man. But the point is, like, we are saving Earth. I mean, we are trying to protect our communities and all these initiatives, all these projects that is out there. And, we are always trying to find a possible solution to all these issues that is there. And again, at the regional level, I feel like this is more important. And with Cosmic Sandbox nearing, and if you guys are interested to join the workshop and become a problem solver with the Cosmic Sandbox, join us on 14th of May. All the details will be linked down below. And we had our amazing expert, Aditya, talking about the business or the environmental part of this Earth intelligence and what is digital Earth and things like that today. Thank you so much, Aditya, for joining us and giving this amazing insights to all our participants and also the general audience who is out there listening to us right now. Thank you so much for joining us today, Aditya.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
yeah, so we will get back to you guys on the next episode with few more interesting experts and few more things to talk about this topic itself, like the Earth observation for Earth intelligence, because the discussion doesn't end with this podcast. We have amazing things wrapped up for you. Till then, stay safe. And this is your host, Alina, signing out, and keep smurfing. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.